something a little different today, an experiment, and I am delighted to be up here with Vi and Marion Stanley. So I'm Karen Jernigan. I've been attending this church for about 40 years, but the couple sitting next to me have been in this church for almost 60 years. And so this is the 70th anniversary of our church, and in honor of that, I decided to go talk to Vi and Marion at their house. And so I was sitting on that couch, listening to their stories, and as they were talking, I was thinking, this is incredibly profound, and I shouldn't be the only one listening to this. So I took a chance and asked them if they would be willing to come just tell you a little bit about this church and its background, and that it's here because so many people have done so much over the years. So we're just going to have like a little conversation here, and we're going to talk about their first memories of Grace, and then a little bit about their religious background, and then the changes that they've seen here over the years, some of the most meaningful parts of being a part of a church called Grace, and their hopes for the future. So I'm just going to sit down here, and we have a few pictures to show you, because actually the church, Marion and I have been here 60 years, almost 60, but the church actually has been here 70 years. So I'm going to show you a picture of the very first place that Grace Church met. And this is at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, Guildhall. Some of you maybe remember that. There was a man named Elton Sundahl, and another family, the Kankleenies, and then 6 other families that had agreed to try to start a church here in King City. And of course they didn't have a building, so they met at the Guildhall in St. Mark's, and this was in 1953. A year later, they moved across the street, right about where Easy Appliance is now. Next door to that was this little building called the Carpenter's Hall. And interestingly enough, John and I just found an article where the Carpenter's Hall was moved over to Full Gospel Church. And so we drove over there yesterday and looked in the back, and sure enough, their sanctuary, or their social hall, is this little building, the Carpenter's Hall. They used to do that a lot in the old days, move buildings around. So then, the church, after meeting at the Carpenter's Hall, started meeting, like Suzanne was saying, on this lot, in that building, which was the Pentecostal church. They were able to buy the land, and this is the building that Vi and Marion first saw as Grace Lutheran Church. So,
can you make out what that sign says? Because I can't.
Nobody can.
Actually, yes, it does say Grace Lutheran. If you zoom in, it really does say Grace Lutheran. So we're going to start by asking Vi and Marion a couple of questions about what they first remember about coming to this church. So, Marion, you want to start?
Sure. Well, when we first came here, we had just gotten married on the 8th of June. We spent several days in Canada, and then we came back to her home in Washington and loaded her little Nash Rambler on a dolly and put it behind my pickup and headed for King City. And we got here, we had talked about a church, and Vi asked if there was a Lutheran church in town, and I said, well, there was one here, but I'd never attended it because I'd been here for a year ahead of time, and I'd gone to the Community Baptist Church several times, but I'd never come here. So anyway, we came to church that day, and people were so friendly and took us all in, you know. And when Lee Olson was here several weeks ago, he talked about shopping for a church. Well, we didn't have to do any shopping. We knew when we left church that day that this was going to be our church home, and it's been that way for almost 60 years. Vi got in right away. She had a letter of transfer because she'd already joined the Lutheran Church. But I had to go through a 6 or 8 week training session and get baptized before they'd let me in. I didn't do this by myself. There was a soldier at Hunter Liggett that was in the same situation I was, and we went through the study period and the baptism at the same time. He and his wife, their only transportation was a motorcycle, and when he'd leave church after the service, he was always real fast, just off and go, spin out here real fast, and his poor wife would be hanging on there for dear life, trying to stay with him. I don't know where they went. They weren't here very long because he got transferred or discharged or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, my background, I grew up in the country in Colorado, as I told Karen, in the horse and buggy days, and I grew up riding a horse. We didn't go to church. I was not baptized, my older brother was, but we didn't have much transportation in those days. My father had bought a 1928 Model T Ford, but it was not very good reliability. It run sometimes and sometimes it didn't. So the folks were not eager to take our family somewhere to get them baptized. And then we got a 1933 Ford that was about the same situation. You were sure you're going to have to walk if you went too far. Roads were bad and everything. So I was never baptized as a child. And growing up, we used to go to Sunday school once in a while, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. The Sunday schools were held in two schools, one of them probably about 8 or 10 miles from home, and the other one a little farther. The closest church was 20 miles, and so we go to these Sunday schools when they had special occasions like Christmas and Easter and Children's Day, and they were held in the schoolhouse. And after Sunday school, we had a traveling pastor, Pastor Burgess, who had a church in town, and after his service, he'd get in his old Model A coupe and drive to one of these schoolhouses. I'd go to one week and one the next week. I don't know whether this was continuous or whether it was just once a month, but anyway, he was our closest preacher, and this went on during my early stages in life. I've had people ask me, when did you accept Christ into your heart? And I'd have to say, well, I don't really know. He's always been there, because my mother, when we were 3 or 4 years old, taught us to kneel by our bed and pray. So Christ and God have always been in my life. And even after I left home, when I was in the service, one of my best friends was the Catholic chaplain's assistant. So he always had to go to church on Sunday, and so the rest of us, I think several of us were Protestants, and they had a Protestant chaplain and a Catholic chaplain, so they had 2 services. So I'd go to the Protestant service.
So let me just interject here too. So you didn't really have a regular church that you went to, but Vi, you did go to church growing up, right?
I was raised Methodist, and I got to the point where I was very unhappy with it. I just did not seem to have enough meat in it for me. So, and then I was going, it was a very rural church, and I also went to a very rural school. And we found out that we were in the wrong district. Our bedroom was in the wrong district. So we had to go to town, and my parents decided, or my mother decided, that we would go to church in town. It was a larger church, but I was uncomfortable in the Methodist church. I just didn't feel like it had as much meat. I guess that's the word I want in it for me. So I decided, and I was dating a Lutheran fellow, and I went to church with him. And my father was very, very upset with me because we were just supposed to go to church together. Well, he went on Easter Sunday, so needless to say, that didn't sit real well with me. So anyway, I've been a Lutheran ever since. I'm very comfortable in the Lutheran church. Yes.
So I think you said when you went to a large church, you preferred a smaller church, and so that's kind of what you found here in King City. And I want to ask you about the people that were here. First of all, I also want to acknowledge that you've been here almost 60 years, but there are two people sitting in this congregation right now who have the record for being here. And the winner is Carolyn Holman, who came just after she got married, and then a year later was Lois Fulton. And so those two women have been equally faithful in this church, and we thank you for all the time that you've devoted to this church. But tell us, Marion, about what you found here, when the names of the people that were here, that were going to the church, because obviously the people made you feel welcome, and you felt like you could be involved in a small church.
Yeah, the people that were here when we came, the Noltes and Kafers and Friesens, Canclinis, and then there were two families of Ramsiers, and Uncle Martin Ramsier got to be one of our very best friends, you know, and the kids really liked him, and we spent a lot of time with him. And Carolyn and Lois, I think that was all that were here when we came.
And yeah, and then Carolyn Elton.
Oh
obviously.
yeah, Carolyn Elton, who started the church. He was very instrumental in getting things done.
So let's talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen over the years. I want to start with, see if I can get this to work here. Okay, can you talk about this picture here? It
Is that a red tail?
looks like a groundbreaking.
Well, that was, I guess, our groundbreaking for this church. Maybe I should start a little before that.
Okay.
When we came to the church, it was Missouri Synod Church, and they were having problems providing pastors and keeping things going, and we were a very poor church. You know, we didn't have any money to go out and do things, and we were trying to find a way to kind of move forward, and we heard that the ALC, the American Lutheran Church, was planning to start a mission congregation in Greenfield. So we got together with them, and they agreed to move their mission package here if they could get an agreement with the Missouri Synod, which happened. And I think the Missouri Synod was kind of glad to get us out of their hands and let somebody else take over. But anyway, the ALC provided this mission package for us and got us started and gave us the money and everything to build the church. And this was the groundbreaking after the other church that we showed before, the old Pentecostal church, got moved to San Leonardo, and then we started this church in June of '57, and it was finished, completed during that year, and we had our first service on Christmas Eve of '57.
Yes, 67.
67, right.
And can you tell the story about signing the mortgage?
Well, the agreement with the mission package, they gave us $100,000, or it was $100,000 to build the church and the parsonage. And Floyd Nolte and I signed the mortgage on it. And I thought at that time, $100,000, you know, that's just more than I could ever imagine. I thought, I sure hope Floyd's got a lot of money, because if I talk about it, it's not going to happen. Anyway, we got the church built and everything went good.
And you probably did not have a lot of money back then because, this was the inside view of the church. That's what you were...
Okay, I was going to describe the inside of the church. The ALC picked the design and the contractor and everything to build the church. And it was a different concept. The church was in the round with the stage back here behind us. There was a large pulpit right in the back and communion rails on 3 sides. And then the pews were on 3 sides. We had pews over here, and over here, all facing the pulpit. They called it a church in the round. And then we had the ramp out in front coming up from the street to the 2nd floor, which was kind of unique. So it stayed that way for a while and then gradually changed.
And here's where I wanted to mention why you didn't have a lot of money, because you were raising a family, right?
Yeah.
So you want to describe who these people are?
Well, this was Doug's baptism picture. When we first came here, Pastor Tesloff was the pastor, and his wife Mary used to sit in the back pew with their baby. Well, a few years later, I found out that back pew in the church is very convenient for people with young families because you've got a quick exit if you need it. And we raised our kids in the back of the church, and then as they left, we gradually, and as our hearing and eyesight got worse, we moved up several pews.
So you're holding Doug,
Right.
and then below you is Tom on the left, and then Bill on the right, and then this has always been one of my favorite pictures. Their daughter Gwen is on the right, and she was one of the singing sunbeams when I first came here. It was in '78. We had a group of little girls that sang in church. We had a little choir. We called it the Sunbeams. And Gwen, Marion and Vi's daughter, was a part of that. So, and then let's talk a little bit about, this was another, one of the changes that you saw over the years.
The changes in the church, you know, we started out with the Missouri Synod, and they were a very strict church as far as the liturgy and the church service and everything. The pastor did everything. There was no lay participation at all. And when we moved to the ALC, that we started having people reading the lessons and helping serve communion and occasionally leading the service and even giving the message. Completely different than what we'd seen before. And then later on we joined the ELCA, and that was even more progressive, I guess you'd say. Some of the things that we saw during this time, and we were a very poor church struggling to get along, and Pastor Ron came in 1980. I described Pastor Ron as a very loving person. Everything he did was with love. His sermons, his writings in the Messenger and the annual reports all referred to love and getting along with everybody and loving everything. And our church, when we first moved in here and got the new church, our attendance jumped quite a bit, I think because we had a lot of people that wanted to find out what was inside the church and be associated with something that was new and moving and going forward. But when Pastor Ron came, the first year was pretty much the same, but the second year we had probably about a 15 member increase in membership and attendance, and it just kept growing after that. He started a lot of programs here. He loved the church and the people in it, and he loved being a part of the ministry, and the people in the town liked him, and we had a lot of growth. And one of the other things that really spurred our growth was the Solid Rock ministry when that started with, in the 80s, and David and Janice took that over and really promoted it, and it grew a lot, and we had some really good vacation Bible schools with some of them joint affairs with other churches, and some of them were on our own, but we brought in a lot of members from those with interest from people sending their children to vacation Bible schools and then coming on and joining themselves.
And like with all organizations, there's ups and downs and flows where people come and people go. And there's a couple of pictures here. This was the addition of the library. Some of you may not know that the library wasn't always there. That was added in
1984.
You were here for that. And then this is kind of a pivotal moment in the life of the church. Aim it at the right place. There we go. Can you talk about this day when they burned the mortgage of the church?
Yeah, there's one other thing I want to talk about before that, and that's, we talked about additions to the church. We had some subtractions too. We got rid of the pulpit. It was a big high pulpit, and Pastor Ron didn't like standing up at that pulpit up above the people and looking down at them. So he liked to walk around out here in front, and be on the same level with the people. And he usually gave his message without any notes. He just walked around talking and giving the message. So we got rid of the pulpit. In 1986, I believe it was, we finally got enough money to burn the mortgage, and this was the second mortgage
because the ALC
Well,
forgave some of our debt.
yeah, we had, I was looking for it, we called it a retooling program in '74, and the ALC forgave a large part of our debt. And going through some of the records, I found different amounts. One said $64,000 and one said $63,000 that they forgave. And that was to try to stimulate the church. And we've had people ask about if our income goes back to the church, to the mission program, and that's because we came in as a mission church, and this money goes back to help start new churches or to help struggling churches. And then after we got this forgiveness of this money, we got a mortgage with the AAL, which is Aid Association for Lutherans. That was a 20-year contract at 8% interest. And that, at that time, that was 2% below what people were having to pay if they were buying homes. The interest rate at that time was 10%. Then in '86, we got that all paid off, burned the mortgage, and we've been debt-free ever since.
Isn't that
I
amazing?
think that's a fantastic thing.
That's incredible.
I don't think there's many churches can claim that.
Right. That groundwork was laid by a lot of people that went before us. And actually, we were looking through some of the old documents, there have just been literally thousands of people whose lives have come through this church in some way or another. And to finish up, I just want Vi and Marion to just talk about a couple of the most meaningful parts of the years at Grace. A lot of it involved the activities and the relationships. Can you speak to that just a little bit? What was the most meaningful?
Well, this was our home, you know, our church home, and we had so many activities, you know, services and different programs that we went through during the years, special services, Christmas services, Easter services. We had a couple of, or 3 different times that we had sunrise services with the community, with other churches. 2 of them at the airport and 1 at the old rodeo grounds, grandstands. And we were in charge of that one. But the church, you know, has been a place that we have really felt comfortable. The youth programs have been some kind of a youth program here ever since we started. And that's one thing that we really feel, you know, is necessary, that we need to look after our youth and encourage them and bring them along.
And Vi, one thing you've always said that impressed me, you talked about the Thanksgiving dinners and how the church has been a family to you. Can you just speak to that?
Yes, and I think it's very important because most of us come from someplace else and we don't have family here. And having our church celebrations of that sort of thing, I think has been very, very meaningful and meaningful to the children.
And the other thing that I think Marion has been very dedicated to is the food pantry. And Marion, I always thought this was kind of a humorous picture of you with some kind of a funny award there. But what you were doing, collecting e-waste, went to benefit the food pantry. Can you talk about what that award was?
Yeah, this is a John Peckham Award. We used to have a e-waste collection here, and the money that we raised from that went to help support the food pantry. and we finally had to discontinue that because China wasn't wanting to buy any more of our waste electronics. But anyway, John had taken a broken down computer and put a little thank you note on it and presented it to me. One of those collections.
We like to have fun here and laugh at Grace, and I think that's wonderful, all the while doing things to raise money for our wonderful food pantry. And before we end, I just would like for you to talk about what you hope to see for the future of Grace. I know you mentioned that you really like what's going on at the Red Tail.
Well, I hope that our church will continue the way it is. You know, there's so much love and compassion and support in this church, and it's great to see that available when people need it. One of the things that I'd really like to know is our service at Red Tail. I don't know how anyone could go there and not feel the presence of God. You look out at the hills and the trees, got a giant tree right there by the barn. Nature's all around, animals and birds and everything. You know, it's just takes you right back to the creation and God. So I hope that we'll be able to continue that. And we have a little different congregation there than we have here at our home church. I think this is really, really good. It gives other people an incentive to come to church, and I hope we can continue that.
Okay, I think that there's a lot more that Vi and Marion could say about the church, but I just really appreciate your faithfulness. Why would somebody come for 60 years to the same church? I think that's a real testimony to this being a place where God is and takes us through times of joy and times of sadness, and we are there to support each other. This 50th anniversary book has a lot more testimonies about the different people that have been here over the years, and there are copies out in the narthex if you would like to get a copy of them. And did you have one more thing you want to say?
I want to say one more thing. Last Sunday, Pastor Negretti talked about us being letters from Christ to the people of the world. And Karen mentioned the thousands of people that have gone through this church. When I went through the records and so forth, you know, it's just amazing the number of people that have come to this church and been active in it, been on the council or taught Sunday school or Bible studies or something, and have moved on. But those were letters from God to us, and then when they went out to the world, they were carrying the message with them. So I think that was really a tremendous message that he gave us about being letters to the world.
That was a great message. And I want to just end our time together, and I hope you'll talk to Vi and Marion more about their memories here. But when we did an interview with Vi a while back, she talked about one of her favorite Bible verses, and I think it's just totally appropriate. It says, "And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." So may God continue to work in the lives of the people who are touched by this church. And thank you to all of you for being here and for your support, and especially to Vi and Marion and our matriarchs, Carolyn and Lois, for their faithfulness over these years. So, amen.